For a long time, we thought we were safe. We thought the dark ages of the Disney cheap quill were behind us. You remember that era, the early 2000s direct-to-DVD slaughterhouse where artistic integrity went to die. It was a time when sequels weren't made by the main studio. They were outsourced, underfunded, and existed solely to keep a copyright active or sell a new line of plush toys. But around 2018, something shifted. Disney stopped hiding their sequels on dusty home video shelves. They started putting them in theaters. They gave them $200 million budgets. They brought back the original A-list voice casts. They utilized their cutting-edge rendering technology. And they promised us that these weren't just cash grabs, they were necessary chapters in the stories of the characters we loved.
But if you look closely at the writing, at the structural DNA of these films, we witnessed a decade-long identity crisis. We watched the studio systematically misunderstand why we loved their modern classics in the first place. It wasn't a lack of budget. The water physics in Frozen 2 are miraculous. The rendering in Moana 2 is competent. The problem wasn't the pixels, it was the purpose. We saw character assassination in Ralph Breaks the Internet, where a hero's journey was undone for a joke. We saw narrative confusion in Frozen 2, where lore suffocated the story. We saw the content trap in Moana 2, where a cinematic epic was reduced to a TV procedural. But then, just as cynicism was peaking, just as we were ready to write off the concept of a Walt Disney Animation Studios sequel forever, Zootopia 2 happened.
Sorry, could you show me that clip again? Wasn't wearing my glasses.
Today, we are going to perform an autopsy on a decade of Disney sequels.
We're going to look at how not to write a sequel,
How to betray your audience, and finally, how to fix it. This is how Zootopia 2 succeeds where other Disney sequels failed. Let's start with the first crack in the foundation, 2018's Ralph Breaks the Internet. Now, history has been somewhat kind to this movie's Rotten Tomatoes score. Critics at the time praised the satire of the internet. And sure, the scene with the Disney princesses is a fun meta moment of corporate synergy.
but if you ask any diehard fan of the original Wreck-It Ralph,
The people who connected with the emotional core of the first film, they will tell you that this movie broke more than just the internet. It broke the character. The first rule of writing a sequel is respect the growth. In the first film, Ralph's entire arc was learning that he didn't need external validation, specifically a medal, to be worthy of love. He learned,
I'm bad, and that's good. I will never be good, and that's not bad.
by the end of the movie, he was secure. He was a man who accepted his role and found joy in his friends. But the sequel decided that in order to have a plot, Ralph needed to be insecure again. Actually, worse than insecure. They turned him into a needy, possessive, toxic friend who literally gaslights Vanellope and unleashes a virus because he can't handle her pursuing her own dreams. The writers sacrificed the character to serve the message. They wanted to write a story about toxic friendships and letting go. Now, don't get me wrong, that is a fantastic, mature theme for a film. But to do it, they had to lobotomize Ralph. They had to turn a lovable, self-sacrificing oaf into a borderline stalker. It feels like the writers of the sequel hadn't actually watched the ending of the first movie.
Furthermore, this film committed the sin of world breaking. The first movie established strict rules about video game cabinets. If you die outside your game, you don't regenerate. Going turbo is the ultimate sin. The arcade felt like a grounded, working-class society. The sequel? It ignores all those rules to make jokes about pop-up ads and algorithms. It trades timelessness for relevance, and nothing ages faster than internet culture. Watching the movie today, in 2025, the jokes about cheeseburger cats and specific 2018 memes are painful. It's a time capsule of cringe. Ralph Breaks the Internet taught Disney the wrong lesson, that you can dismantle your main character's personality as long as you distract the audience with shiny Easter eggs and stormtrooper cameos.
Then came 2019, the juggernaut, Frozen 2. If Ralph was a character assassination, Frozen 2 was a narrative fever dream. This film is the textbook definition of overcorrection. After the first Frozen, people complained that the movie never explained where Elsa's powers came from. It was a minor nitpick, really, but the writers took that nitpick and built an entire movie around it. They constructed an intricate, confusing mythology about the four elements, a fifth spirit, a hidden glacier, and the concept that water has memory. But here's the problem. Complexity is not depth. The first Frozen works because it was simple. It was about two sisters trying to reconnect after years of trauma. The magic was just a metaphor for isolation. It served the characters. In Frozen 2, the characters serve the magic. The plot becomes a video game fetch quest. We have to tame the wind spirit, check. Now we have to tame the fire spirit, check. Now we have to sneak past the earth giants. It's mechanical. It feels like the writers were more interested in building a Dungeons & Dragons campaign setting than telling a story about Anna and Elsa.
And the fatal flaw? They separated the sisters. Again! The entire emotional core of this franchise, the lightning in a bottle, is the dynamic between Anna and Elsa. By sending them on separate paths for the majority of the runtime, the film loses its heart. Elsa becomes a literal goddess, dehumanized and removed from the kingdom. Anna becomes queen. It feels like an ending written by a committee to sell two different types of dolls, Adventure Anna and Spirit Elsa, rather than a natural conclusion to their lives. It's a film that is breathtaking to look at, truly, but it falls apart the second you try to explain the plot to a friend. So, water has memory, and her mom was a spirit, and she is the bridge, but she has to freeze to death to send a message? It's a beautiful mess. And it proved that $1 billion at the box office doesn't mean you wrote a good script.
And this brings us to the nadir of the decade, Moana 2. We all know the story behind this one. It was developed as a Disney Plus series. Then, desperate for a theatrical hit after a rough year, executives stitched the episodes together and called it a movie. And you can feel the stitches.
The problem here is the lowering of stakes. In the first film, Moana saved the world. She restored the heart of Te Fiti. It was a mythical Joseph Campbell-style hero's journey. She faced a demon of lava and fire. In the sequel, she is looking for an island to connect people. The scope feels small. It feels like a side quest. It feels like episode 4 of a show that got canceled.
The villain isn't a primal force of nature. It's a generic obstacle that lacks the menace of Te Kā or the charisma of Tamatoa.
But the biggest insult is the character reset button. This is a lazy writing trope where the protagonist forgets everything they learned in the first movie so they can learn it again. Moana doubts herself again. She struggles with leadership again. Why? Because the writers didn't know how to write a confident, mature Moana. They only knew how to write underdog Moana. So they dragged her back to the starting line. This is the danger of the content era. When a movie exists just to fill a quarterly earnings report, it feels hollow. It feels like a product. Moana 2 isn't a film, it's a 90-minute toy commercial with decent water physics. By late 2025, cynicism was at an all-time high. We expected Zootopia 2 to be another cash grab. We expected the writers to force Nick and Zooty into a cheap breakup just to create drama. And technically, they do break up, but not in the way you think. Zootopia 2 succeeds because it takes the buddy cop tropes and elevates them into something existential. 1. The conflict of care. In most bad sequels, characters fight because they suddenly become stupid. In Zootopia 2, Nick and Judy fight because they care too much. There is a pivotal scene in the mountains where the famous carrot pen, the symbol of their partnership from the first movie, is crushed and broken during an argument. But notice why they are fighting. Nick isn't being a con artist. He is screaming, "I don't care about the case," because he is terrified of Judy getting hurt. This is called protective altruism. The conflict isn't about trust anymore. It's about the fear of loss. That is a massive maturity leap for a Disney sequel.
Number 2. Kintsugi storytelling. The resolution of this film is a masterclass. When they reunite, Nick doesn't just buy a new pen, he fixes the broken one. It's a visual metaphor for kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold, treating the breakage as part of the history, not something to disguise. The film tells us that their relationship isn't perfect. It has cracks, but those cracks make the bond stronger than it was in the first movie. It respects the trauma they went through instead of ignoring it. Number 3, love your partner. And finally, let's talk about that line. The writers faced an impossible choice. Make them a couple and alienate half the fans, or keep them friends and alienate the other half. Instead, they gave us the love ya partner line. It is a brilliant piece of writing. It blurs the line between platonic loyalty and romantic love. It confirms that these two are soulmates without trapping them in a generic Hollywood romance. It honors the slow burn. It treats the audience like adults who understand that partner can mean more than just someone you share a desk with.
By introducing characters like Gary the Snake and challenging Nick's jealousy not over a romantic rival but over his place in Judy's life, the film forces the characters to grow. It proves that Zootopia wasn't a fluke. It was the prologue to the most complex relationship Disney has ever animated. So, what did we learn from this decade of chaos? We learned that you cannot build a legacy on content. Ralph showed us that irony doesn't replace sincerity. Frozen showed us that lore doesn't replace story. Moana showed us that a TV budget cannot buy cinema magic. But Zootopia 2 proved that the sequel isn't dead. It proved that if you respect your characters enough to let them grow, if you refuse to hit the reset button, you can create something that stands toe-to-toe with the original. Disney, take notes. We don't want more of the same. We want what happens next. And there is a massive difference.
No problem.